I've been looking for a way out. I can't find my way now. I just need you by my side. Lately, I've been thinking, baby, we could get away and never look back. Never look back. Never look back. No, never look back. Never look back. No. There's no place to run, 'cause we're gone. When you're staring back at me, 'cause we're gone. And you're staring back at me. And you're staring back at me.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to this session's discussion on right-sizing of companies during a crisis. My name is Bettina Chiongbian, and I will be your speaker today for this afternoon session on a three-part webinar series entitled Right-Sizing of Companies During a Crisis. Okay, so let me begin with introducing myself. I'd like to share my screen. Okay, so for you to better understand this, the three-part webinar series is focusing on engagement and crisis management. So it will be able to provide you ways of addressing the current crisis situation and also the future crisis that may happen, hopefully it doesn't, in any of the organizations that you're working for, your work life, and also your business. So I hope you learn something from this engagement series. Okay, to give you a background of myself, I'd like you to know that I come from two industries. One is the academe, where I learned about ISO management systems and where I started my career as an HR practitioner. And then I moved on to the BPO industry, where my HR practice deepened. Okay, so in HR, I learned to value human capital, and I learned about engagement there. I also learned ISO 9001 during my stint in the academe and in the BPO industry. And currently, I work as a consultant for Creatio 7 Asia. On my free time, I spend my days supporting the Rotary Club of Makati Lumina and spending time with family. And so I have work-life balance. Okay, so let's begin with right-sizing companies during a crisis. Okay, let's talk about the series. The objectives of this series are as follows. We need to understand the concept of employee engagement by the end of this series. Okay, and at the same time, we need to know, the objective is for you to know the process of crisis management and identify the areas where engagement can work during a crisis. So let's begin with the situation. What's happening currently in this 2020? For those in the Philippines, we know that we had a major crisis in the area of Taal last January. we were hit pandemic, and this is a global situation. So what is happening to us right now? And what's happening to the workplace? Okay. Where are we at right now, and what are we doing? Okay. So we know for a fact that the COVID-19 pandemic has affected so many things in the workplace setting. So our critical situations involve the loss of income, um, the and the effect on the economy. Our global economy is affected. So business has slowed down, and even some companies have decided to close. Okay. So what does it mean for the employee? It means for the employee that it affects his or her source of income. And because of this pandemic, so many things have changed. The way we do things in the workplace has changed. Okay, when we used to be in our normal situation, we would be traveling, we would be meeting people face to face, but all that has changed. People needed to cope with technology. So there's this stress factor involved in the change of the environment and the change of the way we process things. And for those who are working, for those who have families, and for those who have investments, there's a big problem with the change in the way our income is coming in. Our investments are affected. So some of us may have to do away with our amenities, with the things that we're used to, and some of us may have to let go of investments. And this is the reality right now. So the big why do companies and people need engagement? Okay, there are different reasons. If you ask companies or if you ask the management team of companies, they would say it's either to meet production, to avoid disruption, so that they can still meet the goals of the organization. Okay. To employees, being engaged means they need to know what's going on, what's happening in the workplace setting. So for them to be able to know how to survive and for them to be able to plan for their future and their career ahead of time. And for those who are very optimistic and for those who are lucky enough, especially organizations lucky enough that they foresee themselves still surviving this pandemic, they need to prepare for normalization. So let's define engagement. I took this from the Merriam-Webster dictionary online, and four definitions came across as very important, which I can relate to employee engagement. So engagement is an arrangement. Okay? It's an arrangement to meet or to be present in a specified time and place, just like a dinner date or an appointment with a doctor. Second, it is an emotional involvement or a commitment. Okay, so if we talk about engagement in the love life setting, it can be a betrothal. Okay, now in the setting of mechanics and engines, it is a state of being in gear. So if we are talking about engines, it's actually the transmission, wherein you have two discs that engage together, that are put together and aligned together such that when one turns, the other turns with it. Okay? Another definition of engagement in military language is that it's a hostile encounter between military forces. So it's a battle. Now, if you take a look at how business people would define employee engagement, and even magazines and management magazines, they would say that employee engagement is when your team comes in primed to give it their all, no matter what their role or their situation is. They're intrinsically motivated to do their best work. Okay, this is from Vanilla Magazine, and you can Google this, and this is the definition that I got off the internet. Quantum Workplace, which is a blog, defines employee engagement as the strength of the mental and the emotional connection of employees the way they feel towards their work. And one of the HR consulting firms says, Aon Hewitt says that it is the level of an employee's psychological investment in their organization. So you can see the relationship that with the definition that as an arrangement in the workplace setting, it's your employer-employee relationship through the terminology of team. And the emotional involvement here speaks of the employees giving it their all. It's their commitment, not just to come to work, but to do their best work. So it's a psychological investment of employees in the work that they do. Now, when we talk about the state of being, when gears are being discussed, it's you refer to something that turns such that it sets things in motion. Now, in a state of being and employee engagement, this is the motivated individual. They're already primed. They're intrinsically motivated. They're motivated from within to do their work. They don't have to be prodded. They don't have to be told what to do. So they're in a state of being such that they are already doing their best work every day because they are engaged. Now, when we talk about encounters, the definition earlier was a battle. But what is the battle in the workplace? It's basically work, things that need to get done. The objectives, sometimes there are opposing forces, there are factors that need to be taken into consideration in the workplace, and issues do crop up. But still, work needs to be done. And in this present time, despite COVID-19, work still needs to get done. Okay, so in employee engagement, the focus is the individual such that they become intrinsically motivated to get the work done at the best possible way. So the role of HR, and I understand that we have participants here who are HR practitioners, some may be students, and some may be individuals who are transitioning from one job and looking for another job. I just want to explain to you that in employee engagement, everybody takes part of it, takes part in it. However, the employee engagement program is primarily management's responsibility. So the management people are responsible for creating engagement programs so that they can give the employees the direction of where to go and the direction of how to do it based on what the company believes in. So they design this. Okay? And designing this is based on frameworks, the value system of the organization, what the company believes in. So then management is also responsible for implementing and communicating this to the employees. So I'm sure during this crisis, if you had a meeting with the management team or with their immediate supervisor, or there was a communications process during this crisis, in one of their engagement activities, things were communicated before they were implemented to you. Okay? But at the end of the day, this is a program. Therefore, it's important for the management team to take note that they have to measure how well the program is doing. Is the engagement of the people translating to meeting objectives and goals? The reasons why we engage employees are important. It's more than just because they get the job done. Okay? So it's not just meeting goals, meeting objectives. It's not just statistics. It's not just numbers. Okay? The reasons why we create this employee engagement program is because of how we value our people. Okay? And knowing the value of the people in the organizational setting all boils down to the following: the vision, the mission, and the values of the organization. Okay? So some companies have a very good vision. They want to reach a certain peak. They want to be able to acquire, expand, see themselves placed in a certain position in the future. However, this vision translates to people having to work for them to be able to reach that vision. Now, when a company also decides on a specific mission, something that they will promise to continuously do, okay, if it is their mission, then somebody within the organization has to do it. So it goes back to the people. Okay? And also, when a company decides to state what their values are, let me give an example. If a company says that they value integrity, they will deal with their employees with integrity. They will deal with their stakeholders with integrity because those are the guiding factors. And that's because they also value the people around them. Okay? I will give you an example on a mission statement. I used to work for a company wherein part of their mission is to give, the statement says that we give where we live. Okay, in that company, everything that's done is to be able to give back to the community where the people who are working in that company live. So everybody is aware of that. That statement is discussed. That statement is planned out for by the organization. Different business units within the organization also plan activities to support the "We Give Where We Live" mission of the company. Okay? So again, like I said, the reasons why we engage employees are not mainly because they just get the job done and for the dollar sign of the company or the peso sign. It's not enough na kumikita lang yung kumpanya, but it's also because they understand that the individuals that work for them in the company are important. Remember, your company is as good as your best employee. So if you don't engage them and if you lose these people who are good, what happens to the company? Okay? Will you still be able to meet your goals, your objectives? Okay? So that's why it's very important that your vision, mission, and values are reviewed. Okay? And that you're creating an employee engagement program to support the vision, mission, and values. And also taking note that the people working for the organization to make those vision, mission, and values a reality are important. So, this is how an employee engagement framework looks like. I'll allow you to take in the diagram for now. So, if you take a look at this is something that I gathered from the internet, and it best describes how people can design an employee engagement program. You can follow this framework. In the middle of things, the program should take into consideration the way we manage talent, which is the top circle. So when we talk about talent management, you talk about the employee experience from the time of hiring, from the time of recruitment. How do you recruit people? Okay, what's the impact on the people that you want to attract in the company? So when they are here, how do you retain them? How do you engage them? What kind of activities do you present? Do you have training programs for them? Do you have a promotions process for those who are doing well? Do you have a developmental plan for them? So to get them engaged, those things should be present in the talent management programs of the company, and that should be tied to the engagement program. Another one is rewards and recognition. So for those who are doing well, does the company have a list of programs and activities that monitor good performance such that you recognize and reward those who are performing? Or getting people engaged, probably for a sales team, because sa sales, You have quotas, you have targets. So kung you're creating an engagement program for rewards and recognition and sales, you can incentivize the program. You can touch base with the sales team and make sure that this rewards and recognitions program is implemented and deployed. What about workforce planning? For those na galing sa planta, okay, or like ako, I came from the BPO, workforce planning is a big thing for us. There are several shifts, there are different schedules, your clients are global. How do you do workforce planning? Where does employee engagement come in? What kinds of programs can you offer? For workforce planning, probably shift bids. For those who are performing well, they have an opportunity to bid for a specific shift that their team wants. Okay, so that's just an example. And another would be in workforce planning and for an employee engagement program, rotating their schedules such that they have time for a day shift and a night shift. That's what they do in the BPO industry. And for now, with the work from home setup, the HR people are racking their brains to be more creative to engage employees in terms of workforce planning, managing the talent, monitoring work. And one very important thing in the engagement framework is an employee engagement program should take into consideration its communication strategy. Communication is key. Okay, transparency is a very important thing. The more transparent the management team is of how they're going to do things, then the easier it is for employees to understand. Okay? So if you have a very good communication strategy, it trickles down to the lower level of the organization. Okay? So this framework should be a guide, but let me show you an actual engagement model by Aon Hewitt. Okay, Aon Hewitt, again, as I said, is an HR consulting firm. So they were able to identify drivers based on their research, and they saw that it is very important for these engagement drivers to have engagement, so that these things that engage people can be measured, and because of these measures, they are indicative of a good performance of the company. Okay, so the engagement drivers that they've identified are brand, leadership, performance, the work. Okay, the work meaning the actual work that they do is the work. Uh, you know, do they have the right type of work? Is it distributed in the proper manner? Okay, or are some job functions, more stressful than others, such that it has to be revisited? So they also have the basics. Basics like, is there proper uh, restrooms, the cafeteria? Do you have the amenities that you need as an employee? So if these things are present, most likely your employees will be more engaged. Okay. So how did Aon Hewitt do it? They have what they call the Say, Stay, and Strive program, and so for them, they in their employee engagement model, they conduct um, their surveys, their engagement surveys, annually or semi-annually, depending on what the company hires them for, what services. So during the employee engagement survey season, they assess what people are saying about the company, and they assess why people are staying within the company. Later on, in the next few slides, you will see the questions, I mean, some of the questions in generic terms of what they ask. And also, they ask questions on why these people strive and continue to work for the company despite challenges. Going back to the original framework earlier, you can see that I in this slide, I am presenting to you areas of concern. So if I'm an employee, what are my concerns? So I was lucky enough in my job with a BPO company uh, that was starting. It was in its first 2 years or 3 years of operations. Then they wanted to find out what were the areas where they could engage employees on. So they sent out surveys of what matters to an employee. They sent out surveys to employees who had very high, long tenure in other organizations before joining them. So they came up with specific areas that were important to an employee. So these are the items that matter to employees. They have to feel that they have a sense of belonging. If they have that emotional connection, then they are most likely engaged. They have to feel that they are managed well. So that question of how I am being managed is also a part of their concern. They have to see that there is room for growth in the organization that we're working with. Growth not necessarily always means growth going from promotion from one level to the next, but it can also mean growth in terms of expanding their knowledge, being exposed to different things, and employees would like to know about that. Another thing is what types of leaders do they have? Are their leaders compassionate? Can they connect with their leaders? Another thing that matters to them, of course, and this will never go in any engagement survey or employee satisfaction survey, there's always an issue with salaries and benefits because there's always never enough, right? But the reality is, when you create an engagement survey, you have to ask the right questions to see if the salaries and benefits uh, are actually, you know, giving the employees what they need, such that they will still continue to work in their offices. Okay, then of course, are the rewards and recognitions programs good? Are they present in the workplace? Another item that's their major concern is their place of work. Okay, so they want to know, they want to see that they have everything going on. In place. They have the right materials and resources that they need, and of course, the kind of work that's handed off to them. Um, Maybe some HR people understand this when they say my kind of work. Some people would say, hindi ko na yan trabaho. No, but an engaged employee will see that if there is a need, they will even support. If there is a need to cover for certain tasks to get the job done. So an engaged employee will see that need, will find a solution, will help management. Okay, that's quite a handful of ideas from uh, the engagement concept. So maybe there are any questions? Let me check on the chat if there are questions raised. Okay, any questions on engagement? Oh, I do not see any questions on the Zoom chat box. Okay, admin, maybe we can... Wait, there's one question, phone-in question. Let me check. Okay, Nan. In any case, at the latter part of this webinar, there will still be room for you to ask questions. Type away right now. You can put your comments and questions in the chat box of Zoom, and I'll get back to it and try to answer them before the end of the webinar. Okay, so let's proceed with the rest. Let me continue with sharing my slide. Admin. Okay, So to sum it up, why engagement is important. We have what we call the engagement profit chain. Okay? So the engagement profit chain states that engaged employees lead to a higher service, higher quality, and higher productivity. So when an engaged employee is able to do that, this leads to higher customer satisfaction. Okay? And of course, with higher customer satisfaction, you have repeat sales and therefore increased sales. They can even probably bring in new customers for you, right? And that means higher levels of profit for the company. Therefore, when you have higher levels of profit for the company, you have higher stakeholder returns. Okay? So that's the engagement profit chain. So I'm showing you engagement programs that I've experienced, and I will take the liberty of using the term pillars of engagement, which is a term used in one of the companies that I worked for, because they are the pillars of engagement. So remember, I mentioned earlier areas of concern. So if you talk about growth and if you talk about rewards and recognition, you can see in the picture, the bottom picture, there was external training provided for me. I'm in that picture, such that I grew. I learned something. I learned something totally different from what I was doing. It was the ISO 9001 training. So that is provided. So it engaged me more. I gave back more to the company by creating quality systems, manuals, and models and modules for the organization. And on the picture on top, you can see that uh, because this is a BPO setup, you have programs that are scheduled. It's broadcasted, communicated, so that people who pass by a common area see the schedules. There's a hype for it. So people look forward to it. Okay? So that's communicated to the employees. And here, when the issue is a sense of belonging, is there time for people to actually get together, have fun, uh, stress relief, to make the time to spend with people that they work with, get to know them better, build relationships, build stronger relationships within the organization so that they understand how they can support each other in the workplace. Another is training, coming from an immediate supervisor or a department head. It's very critical that a subject matter expert, finds the time to teach, finds the time to impart knowledge, to mentor people within the organization. So these are some of the engagement programs that I've been through. Another is the rewards and recognition. You schedule one on a regular basis, a quarterly rewards and recognition, or even within just the department. You have these weekly meetings where you can recognize an employee. Another is in times of crisis or in times of major achievements, do you have a cadence of a quarterly or a regular cascade wherein a business leader or a head of a department starts discussing what's happened in the last period, whether it's a quarter, whether it's a year, or whether it's for the month. So they give the report so that people are aware. Okay, they all align and they remember, oh, this is what needs to get done. Okay? So that communication process is very important to get people on board and to align themselves on a regular basis on what the company needs to accomplish. In second to the last, are the teams appreciative of each other? I think this picture is an HR team, so we come from different sites, and we were given on Valentine's Day by our boss, flowers and a can of chocolates. So it's a little token of appreciation that we really enjoyed, and it made our relationship, because we come from different sites, it made our relationship much stronger. So it connected us. The emotional connection is there. And so it was not difficult for me personally to engage with the organization. And lastly, even in crunch time, even during meetings, because you have those emotional connections, we can still smile. This picture was taken, I think, on my second shift. So I was crossing over to my 16-hour day. Okay, so, but because you have your engagement programs in place, um, people don't mind striving and giving it their all, doing the best work that they can. So at the end of the day, remember those three little say, stay, and strive icons on ANUIT. These are the questions that can be asked. Okay? What can they say about salaries and benefits? If you're an employee and you're answering the survey, what do you think are the employees saying about the salaries and benefits of your organization? What are they saying about your leadership team? If you are a leader, what are they saying about you? What are they saying about the recognition programs that you have implemented? What about work-life balance? Is my boss good enough? I mean, does my boss consider that I don't even have time anymore for family? So what are they saying? What are they talking about? And the key question would always be, will they be recommending their place of work to another individual? People who are highly engaged will always recommend their workplace to another individual. That is one very good indication that an employee is engaged. Okay? Now, what makes them stay? Is it the leadership team? Is it the team building? Is it work-life balance? Easy-easy lang doon. No? It's not that, right? In team building, yes, you build a social relationship with them, but if the team building is structured properly, you also build their strengths, areas where they can improve on so they can work together and improve their communications process, the way they deliver things. Therefore, is there enough development in them or growth? So, so if this is the question that we are going to ask them, one important question that will indicate that they are engaged is, if another offer comes, will they find it difficult to leave that company? If the answer is yes, I will find it difficult, that person is highly engaged. Okay? So you can create questionnaires and measure how engaged they are, taking into consideration the areas that I've just mentioned. But there's one more factor, the strive factor. When people say things and people stay because of what they see and what they experience, and therefore their employee experience is very positive, they strive. They are an engaged team. They strive. So it's important for organizations, the management team, to make sure that they take care of this engaged team. So only the engaged team members are the ones who do strive to work better, work harder, produce more. Okay. Remember, as I mentioned earlier, your company is as good as your best employee. Okay? So any more questions? Because I know earlier we were not able to uh, take on the questions. I still don't see any questions for now. Check my Zoom. None yet so far. So any questions from the audience? Okay, I'm checking my Zoom. Okay, excuse me. So none. Okay, let me proceed. Uh, wait. Let me check. Okay, there's a question from Jude P. Doctora. Engagement takes time. In your experience, how long does it take for a company to benefit from an engagement program? Well, yes, engagement takes time. The engagement program can actually happen right away when you start planning it by involving the people right in the planning stage. So when you take into consideration the planning of an engagement program, you the first group that you will be engaging are the management team. They have to get the buy-in. Okay, you have to get their buy-in to creating the engagement program. Then that small circle should expand. They should involve more people. And when people are slowly engaging the outer circle, you start with your circle of influence. You just like in sales, right? You start with a circle of influence, but in a structured setup, you start with your management team. They involve a larger part of the community, of the work community, and even in the design process. So there's input, there's feedback, and you involve them bigger than until it's cascaded. So if that's the strategy of doing things, you're involving them in part of the design, not necessarily the entire design because that's management responsibility, but even the awareness in itself. Oh, the management team is doing something about it. Then that's a big difference. People start looking forward. Oh, I can't wait. What is in store? No? Ano kaya yung plano ng boss ko? Meron palang engagement program that's new to me. So you can do the hype, watch out. So again, communication process and the communication strategy is the key. Okay. So any other questions? No more questions for now. So let's proceed. Can you please share my screen? Let me get back to my PowerPoint. So we move on. Wait, let me check. Sorry, there's a lag, huh? Yeah, admin, okay. So let's move on to crisis management. Let's define what a crisis is. So crisis management is a time of great disagreement, confusion, or suffering. Okay, it's also an extremely difficult or dangerous point in a situation. So you're probably thinking, well, how does engagement and crisis management link together? So in the second part of the webinar series, I will be discussing that. So I hope that you do enroll in the second part. I will be giving you a clear example of how engagement can be key in crisis management. Okay, now let's move on. Crisis management actually means the actions that are taken to deal with an emergency or difficult situation in an organized way. Okay, so crisis, in essence, means a situation. And in the definition of crisis, you can see a time of great disagreement, confusion, or suffering. So key term is time. The crisis is a crisis because it happens for a specific period of time. It is not a permanent state. Okay? Just like our COVID-19 pandemic is a crisis, this is not going to be the permanent state. We all know that a vaccine will eventually be sold to the public, will be made available to everyone. But what do we do right now? What's happening is that there is a crisis. So there are actions and ways to deal with this crisis in an organized way. Okay? Even our government is going through this. They are doing crisis management. In fact, I just don't have a copy of what was issued by the Department of Labor and Employment. They are preparing as part of the crisis. They understand that companies would have to dismiss and let go of employees. Just this October 23rd, they put out an issue for the HR people. Please check out the DOLE issued memorandum, if I'm not mistaken, an amendment that also dictates that the companies should be able to give the option of first rehire when operations are already running to those former employees. They are priority. Okay? So they're even putting government policies in place for that. So even in your situation, in your own company, okay, like if you are an employee, you understand crisis, you understand wala namang magagawa yung kumpanya, they didn't ask for the COVID pandemic. Pero ang sarap ng pakiramdam na even the law supports na kapag may panahon na magha-hiring ulit, kayo yung priority. So employees need to sign off on that they want to be considered priority. Okay? If not, they technically resign. Okay? So if they resign, then the company becomes is now allowed to hire someone else to replace the post that you used to have. Okay? So let's remember, when you are talking about crisis management, it requires a risk management mindset. Okay? So when a person has a risk management mindset, hindi siya nega. Okay? A risk management mindset, kasi for you to understand, you take on and imagine the worst case scenario of every situation. Such para you can prepare for it. So if you have a risk management mindset, that is good for crisis management. And remember, when you are doing crisis management, you will also be using the same communications channels of your organization. So if you used to do memos, you have to continue using it. If you do postings and all that, you have to continue using it, because the communication channels will be the most vital aspect in a crisis management setup. But remember, it will not be limited to that, because in a crisis, there may be some shifts and change. Sometimes biglang nagkakaroon ng ad hoc committee or business continuity team. They create groups just to handle a crisis. Therefore, there will be a shift in organizational structure. Some processes may change, and the communication strategy may change. So, ngayon, medyo techy na. Okay? During my time as a younger employee, we didn't have, text brigade was alien to me. But right now, you have the text brigade. Communication has changed. So speaking of text brigade, one clear example of crisis management, which is actually something that the government has planned out for, is the NDRRMC. Do you get the messages kapag may earthquake? Okay. So this is in preparation for the big one. Okay. So I get a message from my globe number announcing that there was, I think a couple of days back, an earthquake in Mindoro. So, these things were put into place. And in relation to the big one that I mentioned earlier, the local government units created areas where people should rush to should the big one happen. So it is a big preparation because of risk management mindset. They already foresaw what would happen in the Metro Manila area because of its congestion. People would be working. There's so many people, so they identified these places where people should run to, what the protocol should be. In fact, the Department of Labor took on the responsibility also of ensuring the occupational health and safety, where also the companies are required to hold their earthquake drills, their fire drills. So When I used to be in the BPO setting, I would dread having to be in a certain building when an earthquake drill was scheduled because that building was meant I would be 32 floors up and I would have to run down the stairs. Uh, but then there would be sites where there were only five levels to go down to. So, things like that. In the crisis management, the risk management mindset is really critical. Okay? So, there are 8 steps that I would like to discuss with you before we end this session on crisis management. This is the overview of what crisis management is to me. Okay, it's important for any leader or any individual, even if you are not a leader, to recognize a crisis or a potential crisis. If you are a leader, you are expected to manage its repercussions effectively. If you are not a leader but work with people and are concerned, you, knowing that it is a possible crisis, you need to give your management team a heads up. Boss, miss, posibleng mangyari to, delikado to sa atin. So it's essential, even if it is management's responsibility because we have the authority, it's all our responsibility to manage a crisis. Okay? Even in our own homes, di ba? Kunwari, you're leaving your house, you only have a teenager who's gonna be left in the house and alam mo na magluluto yan ng hapunan because you will be home late. So you make sure they know how to use the oven, you teach, di ba? What are the safety precautions, who should they call before an emergency. And tapos, if you see that the things that they're using, medyo may diferensya na yung hose for what your child is cooking, you make sure that it's repaired. And you would not want to leave your child. So in the same process, in crisis management, you prepare for a crisis in the organizational setup. It's essential to consider how a crisis could arise, okay, how it would be best managed, and how much damage it would cause. Will it be detrimental to the entire operations? Okay. So once you recognize this, the role of people in the crisis management 8-step process, particularly people with authority and people in the management team, are to be proactive. Okay? Proactive ka, but even if you're not part of management, take a note of these 8 steps kasi magagamit mo siya. It's practical tips. Be proactive. You need to identify all the scenarios that can happen if that crisis will push through to the worst case scenario. For example, what would you do if a senior management team member in your staff is dismissed for gross misconduct? What happens to your operations? Meron ka bang buffer? Do you have a second liner? Is there somebody who can take on the load of work? What happens if deliveries are delayed? Who do you call? Who has? Is there a second batch prepared just in case? Do you have that in your stock inventory? What happens if stock runs out? Okay? So being proactive means thinking of the possible scenarios that can happen wrong. Number 2, identify your crisis communications team. This is when the crisis already hits. When you start communicating things during a crisis, there has to be only one member or at least a team that is authorized to discuss things in behalf of the company, to the public, and to the stakeholders. Number 3, when you authorize this person, you make sure that this spokesperson is trained. Because this spokesperson should come across with authority and with confidence. Very clear. So clarity and confidence should be there when they are discussing what is going on, when they are giving the bad news, so to speak. Because when you deliver bad news, normally you create a little bit of chaos and confusion. That's why it's called a crisis. And this person should remain calm and confident because he has been trained to handle the issue effectively. He has all the weapons that he needs when people start bombarding him or her with the questions. So these are the difficult issues that that spokesperson will have to deal with. Number 4, you have to set up your alerts. Okay, because you've in crisis management, you've already done all the worst case scenarios. You know what is the worst case, what is a case that is getting there, and already identify your red flag. For example, if you are a company that has a lot of customers and you have a competitor coming in, and you have a block of the consumer market, okay, a certain segment. Anong mangyayari when you see that you're losing traction in that segment? Ibig sabihin nakukuha na siya ng kalaban. So red flag siya. So new player comes in with all the budget and everything. Do you have anything? It's a red flag. Do you have plan B to deal with these people, to call these people? So either you monitor social media, you monitor your stats, you get your employee sentiments, the workplace setting, especially when a crisis affects your employees. Ano ba yan? Magmamass resignation ba yan? They do a mass resignation, or they boycott coming to work. What are you going to do? You're left with operations that doesn't have people to run, the production floor. So set up alerts, identify who is complaining, who has the very negative sentiments, deal with them, talk to them. It's very important that you know how to assess the situation, assess what is happening, gather all the facts that are available, convene, get together, huddle with your managers, huddle with the different teams, find out what's going on, and analyze why these are the sentiments of the people, what's happening. It's really difficult, no? Kasi iba-iba yung reaction ng mga tao. That's why in the next webinar series, makikita nyo, I will be presenting the different types of employees and the different types of reactions that they have when a crisis comes in. You have the people who are passive, you have the people who just, the naysayers, and anything that the management has planned because they're pressured because of the crisis, act negatively. Okay? Number 6, it's important that during a crisis that we communicate with our stakeholders. Okay? So again, I mentioned earlier, transparency is key. You have to keep it honest. But transparency and engagement can also be used in transparency and crisis management, because this is one way of engaging people during a crisis. So keep your communications honest and open. You have to allow an exchange to take place. Hindi people pressured ka, you're the big boss. No, I don't have time for them because you're busy trying to fix something. Create a team if you don't have time to handle those day-to-day issues. Create a team, or your role is to handle the issues para we can address it and get back to the employees. Okay? So if necessary, lalo na sa stakeholders, you have a complan. You have a mini statement. You share that information with them. Sometimes you even have to share it with clients. Okay? So like, for example, I think recently we had an issue with the internet where they had to upgrade. Something got disconnected here in Luzon for the internet. So Smart Communications and Globe advised its stakeholders that there will be intermittent, the internet connectivity for a couple of days will be affected. So because that announcement came early, ako as a parent, my child and their schools were also informed. Therefore, the school called off synchronous learning only for those days. So assignments were given before the scheduled date of repairs. So that was a crisis as far as the telecommunications industry was concerned. But because it was communicated to their stakeholders, something was done. And also it gave them the time to address the issue without the pressure coming from complaints. They already brought it out in the open. This is our current issue. So now you have to confirm. This is very important. Confirm key messages. Show that you care. and are concerned about those affected by the crisis. If you remember engagement, emotional connection is important to get people to be engaged, all the more in a crisis. Okay? It's difficult because people are going through a lot of emotional stress during a crisis. Whether you're top management because you have to make the big decision for an entire organization affecting many employees, or you're an individual contributor doing your daily work, daily routine, but needs to support a family. It is important to build that emotional connection and confirm key messages of caring. It has to be empathetic and genuine, authentic and honest. This should be reiterated. So confirmation of key messages is step number 7 in crisis management. Last but not the least, after the crisis has happened, or when time permits, even during the crisis, you look at what went well, whatever the activities were for the day, what went well, what didn't go well. So if this crisis management framework or structure is in place, at the end of the day, you can always revisit, oh, why didn't this go well today? Ano nangyari? And then you can convene with the team, short meetings, especially now we are in a VUCA world, volatile, the VUCA setup. Things are going so fast, you need to be agile. You get feedback right away so you can act on it right away. And the point of analyzing these results in crisis management is so that in preparation for a future crisis, you would have already been able to improve the process. Okay? So is that clear? Any questions? Okay, I have one question here from Zoom. Does conflict among employees and management, or is it considered a crisis? Okay, well, conflict among employees and management can be considered a crisis depending on, wait, depending on what type of uh, conflict that's happening. So let me qualify your question. If the conflict is in relation to how things should be done, because it is a client specification of the company, and management is driving the employees to continue to do it in the manner of client specifications, then management can be right. Okay? It's their right because they have to give you the direction based on an agreement with the client. Otherwise, they lose the business. But if it is the way and the manner by which management is telling the employees how to do things, and it is not in any way, how would you say, it's not in any way building a good relationship and good communication with employees, then that is a management issue, and the employees have every right to actually oh, to complain, raise the issue. Okay. So, any other questions? Are there any other questions? Sorry, I cannot see my StreamYard for now. So I cannot see the questions on StreamYard. Wait. Let me get back to StreamYard and I'll get back to you. Okay, so here, questions from Frank Balyaho. What other forms of rewards can be given to employees aside from monetary rewards? Okay, other rewards are paid vacations. Okay, apart from paid vacations, some people give gift checks. Apart from gift checks, there are instances wherein uh, the management team decide to hold a small celebration for the employee and celebrate that employee and what that employee achieved in the company. So I hope I've answered your question. Um, question from Marcus D has put in one of the questions. During this period wherein temporary suspensions and reduced work hours are widely implemented, how do you maintain employee morale, especially when the employee is affected emotionally by the uncertainty? Okay, so employee morale is very critical. Motivating them uh, would probably be giving them the opportunity to understand where you're at in terms of your operations. And you have to show them the big picture. People have the tendency to zone into the current problem when, in fact, like I said, uh, crisis happens in a specified time. So you have to be able to bring them out of that mindset that, okay, I'm so affected now, so that they can look forward to something that you're planning out for them in the future. Engage them. What's a good plan for this? Involve them. So that's one of the things that you can uh, help. You can bring out in employees their willingness to help. Okay. Another question: Does conflict wait? Okay, does conflict from management? Oh, this was the question also in the Zoom meeting. Are there any other questions? Okay, sorry, I just got to take a look at StreamYard now. Okay, admin, maybe we can proceed. I'll start sharing my slide again. Okay, may pahabol na question, but sige, I will answer it while I'm presenting this item, the questions on my slide. Okay, what is the best way to deal with staff resistant to the planned management, like the shift of org structure? It might create another crisis. Okay, when you do a lot of organizational structural change, we're shifting from crisis management to change management. So when you do change management, you have to plan things out by the based on the stakeholders that you're affecting. Um, Sometimes a good key to that is to make them part of the pool that's going to implement the change. Okay, so you distribute those who are uh, the people who are actually the ones who would usually complain. You distribute them to the teams so that they understand why, and they will resist within those small teams until they see the need. Okay, until they see the need to actually implement the change and assign them a role for the change process. Then when they start owning that process, you have nobody to resist it, because the person who would initially resist is now running the show for implementing a change. Okay, so you have to take them in. Our tendency is when there's someone negative, we shut them off. We only shut them off if it's detrimental. What they're doing is detrimental to the business right that very moment. But at the end of the day, the strategy would be to win them over. Okay, so the key there is find the creative way and means to bring that person in. What area is his what is the sweet spot? Is that person interested in art? Talk about art first. Is that person interested in doing processes? Discuss processes, approach that person. I have a problem with creating this flow chart. You see a better idea? Uh, can you give me a better idea? What do you think of this process? O sige, can you join us in the meeting? Slowly involve them. When they start to feel that they're a part of the decision-making process, then it's easy to implement any kind of change, it should be inclusive. Okay. Now, how do we manage? There was one question earlier. How do we manage employee who is disengaged and complaining? Okay. First and foremost, an employee who is disengaged and always complaining is somebody who is not happy with what's going on in the company, or somebody who is not happy with his line of work. Try to figure out why. Does this person have a personal issue? Okay. Or does this person um, have any issues with any of the areas that I presented earlier, areas of concern? If there is one, then it would be a good beginning to find out why. So even hold a coaching session. If you're the supervisor, hold a coaching session with that individual. You have a problem with, you can't even say, do you have a problem? Because it sounds very negative. You can probably approach, okay, so you're now with this leader. How's your relationship coming along with this leader? Are you being supported? Are you being given the tools that you need? Is your work up because you've built a connection? Then that is the time for you to provide them solutions. Okay, so it's actually coaching that will work with someone. And since we have so many questions, thank you very much. Your questions are very interesting. I hope I've answered. This is opportunities. 5 critical areas where management engages during a crisis. So management engagement during a crisis, and the other during a crisis. Now, I will also be discussing how employees engage in the workplace. So let's see what your reactions will be then. And please take down notes, have your questions ready, and I hope you don't forget to enroll for part 2. Part 3 will then be a presentation of best practices uh, on engagement during a crisis. Okay, and I will be summarizing everything in a 4-step approach for engagement. Okay, so these are my contact details. You can email me if you have any questions, Bettina@creatio7asia.com, or you can connect with me through LinkedIn. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your participation. Bye.